Welcome to another episode of Gridiron and Growth. Today's episode is with Karl Sona, the founder of Streamlined Media. Ryan, tell them what they got.
They are going to get everything about being an entrepreneur, but more importantly, deciding in certain moments in your life what you're going to be. I can't wait for you to hear it.
We're going to be talking about therapy, mental health, transition, business, and leadership. Tune in to the next episode of Gridiron and Growth with Karl Sona. Still looking lean and mean. Are you still doing 75 harder?
75 hard has been over for almost a month now. But
Ever since we went to Hillstone.
Yes, exactly. That's when I broke it. You saw how I got into that burger.
Yeah.
I was craving something greasy, man. But you know, I've been keeping the diet and the regimen going to a certain degree. I mean, I think that every time I do the program, there's a part of me that evolves. So it's hard to go back where you came from when you just feel so good, and there are noticeable differences.
Yeah. Do you feel
health and wellness and mindset too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mind super clear?
So clear, man. I mean, I know who I am. I know what I'm here to do. And there's less of those voices that kind of doubt if I'm heading in the right direction. I feel like I used to kind of operate one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. I mean, I finally had this really good traction. It just feels so organic and unique to me.
Hold on, you said you know who you are
Yeah.
and what you're supposed to do. How the hell did you get there?
A lot of trial and error, brother. A lot of trial and error. I mean, I lived a lot of my life. I'm 32 years old at the time of this taping.
Yeah.
I don't know when people are listening to this. And I lived, I'd say, 80% of my life for other people. And when you do that, you're not really tapped into your internal voice. So I really had to kind of go off the radar, do the challenges. I used a number of different vehicles to really start to tap into my internal voice. And I would say it's been really the last 6 to 9 months that I've finally gotten really dialed in on who Karl Sona is, who I'm here to serve and what I'm ultimately looking to do. So, I mean, we can get into some stories about how I did that, but
Let's dive.
it has been very iterative.
So story one is?
Yeah, let's dive right in.
Story one was ending my engagement last year. I mean, if we want to just jump right in.
You ended engagement. Like, I always wonder, is it right? Is it like at the altar? Or
No.
was it like you were picking cakes and like, I can't do this?
Picking cakes, and I was like, you know what, this feels very inauthentic. And I saw that the altar was the next step. And I think oftentimes, I've talked to a lot of my friends. I hang out with a lot of people that are older than me. I've always been a little bit of an older soul. And many of them, unfortunately,
Me and you both.
fortunately, have been divorced. And almost all of them have told me that they knew at the altar. And they commended me. And it's not about, looking for a pat on the back. It's about, again, staying authentic to that voice inside. And that voice for a while knew, hey, man, listen, y'all are not equally yoked. She wants different things. You want different things. It makes sense on paper. Invitations are out. Yeah, we're going to be, quote unquote, disappointing a lot of people. But at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. So I came home March of last year, man, and I had really, really difficult conversation. And at the time, I wasn't really a person that was resourced to have those conversations because so much of my internal compass was rooted towards wanting to be liked and loved. And in order to be liked and loved, that meant I had to be in favor with what the other person needed. So you can imagine how stretched I was walking into my home.
How unfulfilled you must have been every day.
Yeah. And maybe her too.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
women can feel that, right?
Yeah.
Women know when something's off. And actually, we had been having some challenges. So we were mature enough to say, hey, let's take a few days away. You go over there, I'll stay here, and let's just kind of come back and be honest with each other. And so I'll never forget coming through the door, and she gave me a big hug. I had been gone for 3 or 4 days as I was taking man time away to think, and I had a decision, and that decision was, hey, go the easy path and say, hey, baby, I'm so happy to be back. Everything's good. Here's where I've been, or lean into the difficult conversation. And I'm a big believer that, hard is always going to be hard, right? You either take it on the front end or on the back end. And I just wasn't willing to defer it and have a huge catastrophe, kids involved, all the things that come with marriage, right, that we were dreaming towards. So, yeah, man, I told her that, for me, I want to travel. She wanted to kind of stay put. Faith is a big part of my kind of internal compass. For her, not so much. And there were other things there. And after that conversation, we basically got to a place where we were like, you know what? I think it makes the most sense to not move forward. And that was a big drum.
super mature by you. A lot of acknowledgement, because it is hard to like lean in. That's a hard thing to like lean into that type of conversation, because, you know, when people get engaged or they're thinking about getting married, it's like they are doing it for other people, or like, oh, I'm at this point in my life where no, I have to do it now. No, man, shout out to you. And wow, we just jumped right in to start it off.
And, you know, when I hear that, I'm like, that conversation and that decision you just described, that makes your journey to finding who you are and what you were supposed to do even more impressive. Because now I take it a period of time, you were that person's partner. Like, that's how you saw each other. And then not only now are you without that person, but now you're without that person and you're still looking for who you are. I mean, where did you go next, man?
Yeah, that's really, really well said. The way I saw myself completely turned itself upside down on its head, right? But, you know, when a door closes, typically another one opens. And what I had to learn in that time was, despite all the sadness and the difficulty, there's still a lot of happiness available. And how I found that was, I actually ended up out in Europe. I took a trip on a whim. I was out there. I started off in Italy, actually. So I had an opportunity.
One of the most romantic places on earth.
Yeah. Honestly, it was so ironic, because we'd been talking about going to Italy, and here I was probably about 30 or 40 days after all of this in Lake Como, Italy, on a boat, looking at this beautiful place that I'd never been, and just completely like amazed at where life had brought me, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing about when you don't really force a healing process and you just allow things to kind of come naturally. Like, there is kind of a smarter, stronger power out there that is supporting all of us, right? So I find myself out there. I'm like, man, this is a trip. Like, I'm supposed to be here with my lady. I don't have a lady. My business is a young, immature business at the time. You know, I'm trying to like discover things about myself. I'm trying to interact with people in this new environment. And I just loved it all, guys, because the thing about me is, you know, throw me into a challenge, put my back against the wall. That's where I can really figure out who I am and how I can perform. And that trip really just provided me so many opportunities to do that, right? And more importantly, it opened up my eyes to the dream and the desire that I'd always had to be bicontinental. I think that was something that I'd forgotten about. COVID came, obviously it grounded all of us. I was going in the path of marriage and, you know, all of that. And that's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. But again, I had been putting those parts of myself off to the side. And it was just like life rewarded me with this trip to be like, hey, this dream, this vision is still out here. Go touch that. So that's why I'm going out there again for 90 days.
He's about to go see George Clooney again, huh? Yeah, Lake Como.
I just love the fact that, like, how aware you are. I just think that, I mean, we became friends, I don't know, maybe actually during the pandemic. Shout out to Ross for connecting us. And he was like, you guys got to meet. And then we had a great conversation at Starbucks in Greenwood Village. And that just led to a great friendship. But man, just I have to acknowledge your self-awareness, or just the fact those journeys are hard, of like looking at yourself. You know, I think sports forces you to do that
100%.
Every single week.
Every day. Yeah.
Like, how did I do? How am I going to get better? And how do you step into that? But I think that's, even as a man and a black man in this world, like, you're supposed to be tough and you're supposed to be the alpha male, and like leaning into those things and like, wait, let me take a step back.
Yeah.
Shout out to you.
Yeah, you know, and oftentimes, you know, considering our community and our culture, we're coming at it from a place where we don't really have a lot of environmental exposure, if you will, to navigating feelings. I mean, I had to get into therapy. You know, I come from a West African traditional household. That kind of thing is like, boy, stop being soft. You don't need no therapy. Just go out there and take a machete and cut the lawn. You know what I mean? But like, just like having that conversation with my family, even like, hey, I think I need to get into therapy, was a strange one. But the beautiful thing about difficult times is they ultimately come with growth. And me being able to come to my family and say, hey, like, I'm doing this for my own wellness, you know, considering this huge bomb that just hit my life, has actually created deeper bonds in our family dynamic. It's allowed me to demonstrate that this is something new that we can explore as a family. You know, my mom's now going through some things that she's been able to say, you know what, maybe the therapy thing isn't so far-fetched. So it's almost like I've been in this position where I have an opportunity to usher my entire family into a new level, into a new echelon. And we talk about this with like the wealth creation side of things. You know, if you're a first generation kid like myself, you know, often you're not coming from a bankroll type situation. And so if it feels hard for you to take that next leap, you know, don't focus so much on the challenge, focus more on the opportunity. You know, and maybe it's so difficult and so heavy because you're the first one that really has an opportunity to rewrite the narrative. So I play a lot of mindset games with myself, and I'm sure from an athletic perspective, you all have to do that too. Like one more rep or whatever that might be, to just kind of get a little bit of extra fuel out of yourself and not limit yourself to the story.
Yeah.
It becomes so easy to limit yourself to like what the story should be from a victim perspective, and I'm just not willing to compromise on that, and I'm not willing to accept that.
I want to stay, though, for a minute on something incredibly powerful. I mean, you as a black man talking about going to therapy. I've been going to therapy. It has been revolutionary. I mean, and one of the things that I love is I can answer people's questions honestly. How are you doing? I'm great. I'm coming from a great spot.
Yeah.
What did you, in addition to the deeper bonds with family, what did you gain most from going to therapy?
Oh, man. If I'm going to go here, I'm going to be real, right? So, like, you know, there are some things that I experienced as a young kid that I don't really ever talk about, but, you know, in the sake of being transparent and being aligned with who I really am, because that's ultimately what therapy has helped me with, I'll share it here. So when I was younger, I had an experience that was a difficult one. There was a sexual abuse situation that happened to me at the age of like 4 or 5. I can barely even remember. But, you know, we grew up at a time where our parents were all from Cameroon, as I mentioned. They're all trying to make it, you know, typically that involves school, multiple jobs. And so you're just kind of like left with different kids. You got older kids watching a bunch of younger kids because there's really no childcare. And there was a situation where there was an older kid that was of my dad's friend's like stepson or something like that. And he would just do some weird shit to us, honestly. And that was something that I never really opened up about because I think first and foremost, I was so young. I was just confused by what was happening.
Yeah.
I would see like my parents just so busy trying to figure things out. And I'm very empathetic to people. That's just kind of how I am in my nature. So there was almost a part of me as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, however old I was at the time, making an adult decision to be like, you know what? Let me not bring this to them because that's just one more thing.
Right.
Very, very strange, right?
Yeah, but it makes sense the way you explained it. You were making an adult decision in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So that was just something I just put in the back of my mind. I mean, I just like, I'm not going to touch that. That's just like, you know, wrapped up in whatever. And you know, you don't really realize how these things affect you. Therapy has taught me a lot about how your body can hold on to these traumatic events, you know, how your body keeps score. There's actually a book called The Body Keeps Score that I recommend for anybody that's trying to figure these things out. And how ultimately what doesn't get expressed or what is repressed gets expressed, you know? And I saw that in intimate relationships. It was like there was a part of me that I could never really show to people that I was with, right? And people that really desired to know me for like the real me. And ultimately, man, like I know what kind of life I want to have. I want to have a life that is rich and deep with connection, right? So in order to have that, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, wow, I need to address that thing in the box over there. Mm-hmm. I can't continue to sidestep this. And, you know, you talk about therapy being work. I never really understood that. I always thought that was some bullshit. I thought you just went in there and you just like, you know, posted up.
What you see on TV.
It is because you start to have these revelations, and I have a very high aptitude, right? So when I learn something, I learn things pretty quick. I really have no other choice but to like follow through on them because it's like, now you know better. Mm-hmm. You can't just be ignorant out here.
Yeah.
And that shit sucks because it's like, man, like, this thing is coming up. Like even just now, Benny, as you asked me that question, I could have sidestepped it with something like it was a little bit more sugar-coated.
Right.
But I've been doing the work. I continue to do the work. It's a lifelong journey. I was like, all right, like this is probably an opportunity to exercise that muscle. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's kind of a story that hopefully demonstrates
strong rep, homie. Strong rep.
Yeah.
How that has helped me, or how that journey has evolved me as an individual.
More acknowledgement, bro. I think that was just incredible for you to share. Thank you for sharing it here. And then, like, this is obviously a safe place, and but what that will do for listeners, what that will do for people, what that's doing for me right now in terms of like, that is something that's super hard just as men, is like, like there's this stuff right here that I have to address, but like, damn, like, do I really want to go there right now? I think it happens every single day. Relationships, like, yeah.
How do you personally deal with it? I'm just curious.
I would say coaching is a way that I deal with it. And we've talked about psychedelics. We talked about journeys, facilitators. I think that's also a way to deal with it, to where your ego actually has to get put aside and you really have no choice in the moment. I won't go into, everything that, I'm thinking about doing or trying, but when you talk about those things, for sure your body's holding on to something. And I think psychedelic medicine and the research that I've done on it and that I continue to do on it is that it puts your ego aside, and it puts all that aside. You have to address it right then and there. It's one of those things we were talking about, I think, rhythmia, where you really want to go experience that and let all that stuff go. Yeah. But it's super hard. I'm scared to do it because I know there are things that I have to face. It's hard to do.
It is. It is.
For me, you say yes, and for me, you want to know? Yeah.
Sure.
For me, it really helps me to get some clarity, even on a term. Like something you said, you lived your life for 80% other people. I've been there, right? Like, hey, going to a new team, I want everybody to like me, right? And then at a certain point, it's like, well, I don't give a bleep if anybody does, but I'm not necessarily behaving with how I want to be. And one of the things that came out for me in therapy is I'm way more introverted than ever, I thought, because when we go to a place as an NFL football player, you go to a place as a successful entrepreneur, like you're on the minute you walk in. And I never understood that I could be both an introvert and have the ability to go on, and so just knowing that, and it gives me a space. And for me, what therapy has done is it's allowed me to, even in retrospect, hey, I should have said no to this because this was for someone else. And so it gives me a runway to take that action. And it's something that I'm so glad you brought it up, because, man, therapy is so good for everybody. And I don't care who you are. If you think you got nothing to go in there and talk about, I promise you you're wrong. Right? I promise you you're wrong. So I'm glad you brought it up.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Well said, brother.
I've never met the perfect person. I've never seen the perfect game. So we all have something to work on. I do want to ask you, in terms of, you said you were living 80% for other people. Where do you think that percentage is now?
Oh, that's a great question. That is a great question. I would say that, okay, let me answer it first from how I feel, then I'll maybe try to quantify it. Yeah. Now the work that I do is really more from like a service perspective. Living for other people, the 80-20 or whatever it was I said earlier, it's interesting, man. It's really like a vanity thing, right? Because you're not really present with people, right? You're not really able to share all of who you are. You're actually robbing people, trying to over-acquiesce to how you think they need to feel in order to give you affirmation. And if you think about that, like, what are you seeking? You're seeking affirmation. It's a very self-centered thing. So how can you actually pour in other people? How can you actually serve? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that 80-20, it's like, yeah, as I hear that, I'm like, okay, I'm living my life 80% for other people, 20% for me, but I'm really like robbing other people. And so now, because I've embraced all the parts of myself and I'm working on doing that every single day, I would say that, it's 100% for other people.
Okay. Wow.
Because when you show up, you want to be there.
I mean, like, if I hadn't gotten to a place where I could share some of what I've already been sharing, man, y'all are just getting me to open up.
I'm feeling 100%.
I mean, it's just hot in here. She warned me, it's hot in here, Like, well, then that takes away from somebody that's on the other side of this, listening, wherever they might be, going through something that, they really need to hear this word.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I think our lives are always being, maybe not always, but it depends on if you take the accountability to have your life be a work that can serve someone, whether that be through your craft, through your speech, through your words, your actions. You never really know how that provides a data point that can shift someone else's reality as a result of somehow interacting with it. So I think the best way you can do that, right, is to be all of who you are. And that has been so freeing, because I used to always feel like there was something like not up to par. You know, you look at other people like, I got to kind of do it like Benny or like Ryan, or like, no, like do your thing, right? Like even in the Bible, it says like, hey, like we are all part of one body, but we're all different parts that serve different purposes, right? So it would, to like really make this simple is like, would you want your eyes to try to do the function of your nose?
No, not at all.
Exactly, right? like the eye is supposed to help you see, the nose is meant to help you like smell. It's like you want those two things living in their congruent sort of fashion so that the entire body can persist and thrive. And I think that when you really, as an individual, take accountability over that, like that's when magic can happen. You know, in my company, we say high tides raise all ships. But like we need you to be like focused on your lane so effectively so that we ultimately can all eat.
Let's talk about your company, Streamlined Media. How did you start it? How did
Yeah.
you know that you needed to start your own company?
Started it from my dining room table in 2020. Knew I needed to start my own company because I'd been making a lot of other people wealthier than what they were, and it was time for me to get my own.
Yeah.
I wanted my own break. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I come from corporate sales, enterprise sales for med tech startups, medical device companies. Did very well. Was very fortunate to land an opportunity in that space right out of college. I kind of consider that space sort of similar to like landing a professional athletic type opportunity, right? But just in a corporate setting, because you can really crush it if you like land with the right team, right product, the whole thing. In fact, a lot of former athletes come to med device because it really aligns with that competitive spirit.
Commission too.
Exactly.
The upside is crazy.
The upside is crazy, right? So I knew nothing about the space, but kind of got in and recognized that I was an asset and really leaned into that, built a brand and helped this company go from basically like 5 million in ARR to about 35 at the time that we exited.
They didn't give you ownership?
Oh no, I had some equity, so
Okay,
I
I
did
was
well.
gonna say,
I did
yeah,
well.
Shout out to Carl. Carl
It was-
taking the ownership mindset. Love it.
Yeah. So we got bought out in 2019, end of 2019, end of early 2020 for like 420 mil.
Let me pause you right there. Let me pause, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Pause you right there because I can't count that high. Man, I'm willing to bet, and maybe I'm wrong.
Sure.
Were you the only brother in the room at the closing table?
I was.
So what?
I wasn't in the room, but I was the only brother in the company.
What was that like? I mean, was there any change in people once it was like, oh man, Carl's gonna get this? Like, how did that change? Was there any change, or what was that moment like?
No, I mean, it was a very incredible moment, right? Because I was so bought into what we were working to achieve. You know, my entire 8 years there. The company had been in existence 10 years total, but I was a very early stage employee there. And it became so much of my identity. Like I live to help this company help hospitals cure lung cancer. Like I didn't even know who I was really.
You're
was
talking
just,
to random smokers on the street, like, hey, yeah.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you,
know?
how did you get so bought into? Yeah, keep going with the story, but how did you get so bought in? But if you're doing something like with lung cancer, like
Yeah, I mean, well, we had a really great leadership team. My CEO, Jason Pesterfield, was former player actually. He played in Nebraska. And I mean, just had that coach spirit. Like I've always been a team sports guy. I played basketball growing up. And it just feels good to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, like money aside for a quick second, which the money was amazing. Every single day I got up, I was flying from here to there, like helping these surgeons, you know, navigate situations that they wouldn't be able to take care of without us. So you start to feel needed.
yeah.
And I think that's probably like the biggest shift, right? Going from a company to entrepreneurship is over here you feel needed because this sort of ecosystem has been created and they've plugged you in. Over here, you got to go create all of that from the ground up. And so it's kind of a shift. So, you know, coming out of that acquisition, I was really met with one of two choices. It was continue down the med device path towards executive leadership. And I was looking at a couple of different offers from other startups to do that. Or, and this is again where you start to kind of really tap into that voice, go at it your own and build something from the ground up. And I'll never forget being on my rooftop deck and just kind of sunbathing. Black people sunbathe too.
Let them know. With sunscreen.
SPF 40 or SPF 50.
Yeah, hey, get it on there.
I might have been on some sort of medicine. I can't remember. Just keeping it
in a
transparent.
recreational space. After 400 million, I think you're allowed. All right, ain't gonna be nobody to judge you.
Like,
there.
what do I want to do next?
Yeah, there's people who wouldn't be alive if they got 400 mils.
And I honestly just heard that voice come through. I mean, that's the spirit. And it was like, hey, listen, dear Black CEO. That's what came up. And that's what caused me to launch that podcast, where I basically recognized that, hey, listen, everybody I'm talking to right now is doing the executive leadership, board director type thing in the med device space. That's great information, but you got to be mindful where you're getting your information from. I recognize I didn't have enough counsel, so to speak, on the entrepreneurship side. So the podcast was kind of initially designed as a way for me to be able to network and to have some value to add. And after enough of those conversations, man, I just started to recognize that, there's nothing like being able to buy your time back. And I think so much of us get caught up working for money and not really, focused on the unique skills that we can build in terms of recruiting people, building systems, so on and so forth, to help us buy our time back so that we can pour from more of a fulfilled cup. And if I did an honest assessment and audit on where I was as a professional in the medical device space, man, it was really just, again, living for myself. And that's just not something I really want to do. I'm not really interested in that. So that's really what caused me to go down the business perspective. And Streamlined Media, I mean, I can tell you that whole story. It came together out of nowhere. It was never my goal to run a podcast company.
Well, what were three key steps? I mean, you didn't open your door and have a podcast company.
No.
What were the three? So you said, okay, you're on the rooftop and you're SPF 40, hanging out in the Speedo, and then what were the three steps you knew you needed to make?
I didn't say Speedo now.
Oh, you were butt naked. You were butt naked. All right. You got high walls up there, huh? So what were the three? You said, okay, I know I got to take these 3 steps to get this launched. What were the 3 launch steps?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. First and foremost, it was closing the door on the medical device space. There was
identity.
Yes. Initially, I was considering taking an opportunity that was a very solid opportunity while continuing to build this. And one of my mentors told me, hey, listen, man, if you really want to do something great, you can't serve 2 masters. And that kind of just stuck with me. So that was the first thing. Secondly, it was building a team. I've always kind of been a, put your head down, kind of get it done kind of guy. But in business, especially when you're starting, we were bootstrapped. There's so much you have to do. I mean, you're marketing, right? You're doing fulfillment, your customer success, like
business development. It's crazy.
Woo! So I very quickly realized, like, okay, man, this is where I need to be able to use my selling skills to sell other humans on an opportunity here that could be big enough to where their visions can still fit. So like figuring out people recruitment. We have this saying on our company, and we really like to hire 9s and 10s. We want the best of the best. And so I think to get the best of the best, you kind of have to be the best of the best. So that took a lot of me like saying, all right, like, what are my gaps in business? And I'm doing this every day because I'm still a very young person in business. I didn't go to school for this. I mean, it just takes a lot of honest assessment of yourself.
Absolutely.
So that talent recruitment piece. And then last but not least, man, like going to market, I didn't really know how to think about it in the beginning, but the thing that I always come back to is relationships. I had a lot of relationships. Even while I was in medical device, I was investing in real estate and doing some different things. So I had people I could call upon that ended up being kind of our initial test group market, right? Like that was our initial kind of product market fit, real estate investors that we were like launching podcasts for. And so that helped us kind of go through the motions of, all right, like how do we market, how do we get cash in? How do we then fulfill? That then really helped us build this system where today we help a lot of tech companies. We're launching a production studio where we're going to be working with athletes, and I have some actors that are coming on that want to do podcasts that we're going to own.
Look at this guy.
To the content, too.
So this is an interview. This is what this
That
is.
way, that way on the back end, you know, we could do some cool shit and sell it to Amazon or Netflix or whomever, you know. So
I love how you're just thinking big. I love, like, I don't know. Obviously, you see why Carl's here
Yeah,
and like
man,
why
I'm
we're
Thankful.
friends. By the way, you guys both enjoy cigars, so
yes. I was gonna bring you a Partagas. but I
Oh
forgot.
man, okay. So,
Yeah, so you
we'll,
guys are
we'll go to the Brown
Brown
Palace.
Palace.
Oh, you go.
Yeah.
Django Gatsby will take you out. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. We'll have a good time.
But just love the way that you think about things. So far, as you've just been building Streamlined Media, what's the number one thing that you've learned in terms of like operating that business or being the leader of that business?
What's the number one thing that I've learned?
Or a couple of things.
Quite a bit. Okay, so I would say first and foremost, humility is a secret weapon. You know, even as we sit here in this studio, I used to struggle because I'm in the podcast production business, but I honestly couldn't tell you how all this stuff works.
Microphone in front of you.
Like I'm just not the tech guy.
Right.
You know,
You know the guy.
But back to how I used to operate, it was like, Carl, you got to be like rocket at that. And it's just like, nah, man, like this is where we've got Kevin and Julian and Adine and Danny who really help us bring it all together, right? So for me, it's not about always having the answers, which was something I used to love to do. I have the answer and kind of facilitating a safe space to where they can give me the best information. And then collectively or whatever that might look like, we go out and we make the appropriate decision, right, relative to the business. So that was something that just took reps, so to speak. Secondly, I would say that, you know, scaling responsibly, right? I used to be all about like growth. And I think I was telling you this maybe, like I looked up one day, I was like, man, we have like a lot of like holes in our bucket. Like maybe I should like slow down on this. You know what I mean? It's like every single quarter I basically do like projections and I'm like, this is what we're doing, you know, and I started to kind of get some pushback from my team and I was getting frustrated because I was like, no, we need to be growing like very considerably, you know, month over month, quarter over quarter. And again, that's where like the humility lesson had helped to where I was able to get this feedback and I was like, oh, wow, from an operations perspective, we're actually struggling. And I'm not really an operations guy. I'm a vision guy. I am a communicator. I'm a generator if you're into the whole human design.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of discipline to just kind of pull back and say, hey, listen, the last thing we want to do is bring people into a system that can actually support what we're promising. So let's take a quarter and a half and let's just retool so that we can fulfill and ultimately provide a better, you know, customer experience. And that was probably happening, I'd say, towards the back half of last year. Wow. And I'm happy we did that because now things are very operationally sound and we continue to work on it in real time to make it even more, you know, structured of a foundation.
Business will teach you that. I think I shared with you when we first met, like I was doing a coaching course and was trying to scale a coaching business without any clients. Like you can't do it. like, oh, I got to get 1 million people. They're like, you don't even have a product yet. And I wasn't listening because I was a visionary. All I could see was the end. But you have to have those type of people. You going to say something?
No, I want you to keep going. Go ahead. But
no, that
you
was
have a
it.
question with it, yeah?
No question. No question. Carl's just the man.
Yeah,
so,
dude. I mean, this has been amazing. And you gave us a huge opportunity and you didn't know it. I mean, Gridiron and Growth, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this is because there's so many examples of what people go through, whether you're an athlete or a business person. You said your identity was tied to that company that sold for $420 million. Or was it 428?
25.
420.
420. All right.
That's funny, 420.
Yeah.
Never thought about that.
Yeah. You gave us a great opportunity talking about your identity was tied to that company that sold for $420 million. Benny and I could spend hours telling you about trying to break away from the identity of being an athlete. How did you do it with that company? What were the concrete steps or realizations you made to separate your identity from saving the world from lung cancer to having nothing to do with that moving forward?
That's a great question, man. Honestly, it's not a linear path being able to pull back from that. There are times still, because I've got one gentleman that's trying to recruit me right now, where it's like, So here's the thing, man. In order to understand what you're actually put here to do, irrespective of what you do for work or, what you are to the community, so on and so forth, I think it requires individuals to be able to go into the wilderness. And that looks different for every single person. For me, my wilderness was taking a trip down to Cabo. I went down to Cabo.
That's very wild. Very wild.
Love that spot.
And I took this 7-mile walk along the beach. Shout out to my homie Dan Mangena. I think he'd be great for your podcast. He teaches people about quantum physics, which is something that I'm really interested in. So he had this workshop down there, and we just kicked it, and I'm listening to these stories. I'm learning how things like string theory and all these different principles work. And then I'm walking down the beach 7 miles along the ocean, which is just endless. It's vast. There are no boundaries. It's not rigidly defined. And I just felt akin to the ocean. As weird as that sounds. And I'm like, I feel like I have that kind of power within me that is endless and not bounded, or there's no boundaries to it, right? You can't label it. All the things that I've had over here as a corporate professional or whatever. And I just knew that that's what I wanted, right? And so I made that internal decision that, you know what, no matter how painful, I'm going to commit to going this direction. And I think it just ultimately comes down to that decision in the wilderness where you're unperturbed or you're not necessarily influenced around, the societal pressures, the worldly pressures of how am I make money, whatever might keep people stuck, you see, relative to the identities that they've built up that aren't even their own. So that was the first step.
What if you didn't go to the ocean that day? You ever think of that? If you didn't go on that walk?
I think about things like that all the time.
I think that all of these things that happen, are predetermined. I think that they're destined, and ultimately they come down to just little decisions. To your point, right? Are you going to book that plane ticket? And I had just gotten engaged the week before, so it would have been easy for me to be like, no, I just got engaged. I'm not going to do that, and actually take that trip, right? And so this is why I'm really present. At least I try to be with the seemingly trivial decisions, because life ultimately comes down to moments. And I think, similar to a plane, if you just kind of, steer that puppy 1 degree off, you're trying to get to, France, where I'm going in a few weeks, you might end up in freaking Australia. You see what I'm saying? So I was able to lean into no, I got to go on this trip, right? Found myself on the trip, had that revelation. And then it's about integrating what you've now become aware of in your day-to-day. And
execution.
If you know one thing about the day-to-day is it just brings a ton of disruption. There's so many competing forces for your attention that make you just want to kind of steer back towards whatever your status quo was. And over the years, I've just kind of learned that those disruptions after you make a decision, they're actually right on time. They're actually indicative of the fact that you're on the right path. So if I could tell anybody that's listening to this right now is hey, listen, if you make a decision that's contrary to what you've been doing and shit just starts to fly off the wall, okay, I'm gonna go to the gym, and your car breaks down or what, get your ass to the gym, because that's just life kind of testing.
Yeah.
To see if you're really serious about it.
Yeah, and all of that is just developing and shaping you into ultimately who it is you're getting ready to step into. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was just able to do that enough times, and then I practiced meditation. I had this insane thing called a Kundalini meditative experience.
I've heard of this, but tell me.
I didn't even know what it was, man. I was upstairs meditating, and my arms and my legs started to levitate.
No way.
Seriously, on God. And then I saw my 47-year-old self. He was this dude. He had a little salt and pepper beard, kind of an all white. Seemed very calm and very self-assured. Seemed like a very peaceful, kind soul. And I had an opportunity to sit with him, and then it dawned on me that was me. And I asked him, I was like, man, how is it that you get to like live this way? You know, because over here I'm feeling like all erratic and whatever. And he looked at me and he dropped his shades and he's like, young man, we get to live this way because of what you're doing right now. And I was like, damn, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. You know what I mean?
Goosebumps.
So it's just
Goosebumps.
like, you got to keep stepping into that. You know, you got to pull that next version in, right? And okay, here's a simple formula. It's be, do, have. You want to become something, right? Or you want to have something. Like, okay, I aspire to be that 47-year-old, calm, serene, Morgan Freeman type dude or whatever, right? Okay, what do I need to start to do right now that will help me become that? And if you spend enough time with yourself, I can't tell you what that is for whoever might be listening or for you, gentlemen, but if you spend enough time with yourself, you start to identify things, maybe like a 75 hard challenge or whatever, that can, you know, indirectly or directly help you become that so that you can have that opportunity or you can have that experience. That's really it. So I think every single day, every single moment is just an opportunity to step into, you know, who's out there waiting for you to become. Even doing this talk show with you guys today, I mean, part of what I see myself doing is this sort of thing at whatever level, right? And so here's an opportunity to be that today. Like, don't defer that. Don't say, oh, I'm gonna just somehow wake up to that. No, be that right now. You see what I'm saying?
Talk your shit.
Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I mean, so yeah, you absolutely did. I mean, getting away from your identity with that company, you listened to nature. You put yourself in nature.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a different person after walking next to the ocean.
Yes.
And then once you have your Kundalini Morgan Freeman moment, it's over.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You even work in pharmaceuticals anymore. You know what I mean?
And I had a big test after that. I had a company ready to go IPO via SPAC. I was going to get like well over, and again, another couple million in equity.
Oh, my God.
And so I was negotiating with the CRO. And I just knew, man, I had a really good reputation in that space. So I didn't want to like tarnish that because I had changed. That whole experience had changed me. B, I knew it was a test. Again, back to what I just shared about disruption following intention. Like this opportunity, it's not just a coincidence that this comes.
Right.
It's trying to say like, hey man, like that ish you're talking, like do you really mean that ish?
Right.
So like I remember being in Cherry Creek. I just left Soul Cycle and I'm walking. I'm like, oh man, like, hey, listen, Chase, I don't think I'm your guy for this. And I was like so nervous.
Saying no.
Saying no. I mean, I think that part of me was still like a recovering people pleaser. Part of me was just like, man, you're an idiot. Like you have a little bit of revenue over here, but it pales in comparison to what they're offering. But I was like this. I was like this with that opportunity. And after I got off the phone, I was like this. Straight on.
Values aligned.
Yeah.
Values
yes,
aligned.
that was a big like lesson. And also like I would say one of those defining moments, you know, where, you know, who knows what's going to happen. I don't know, right? With the company, everything could go to zero. But like it was one of those
go to the top.
Or go to the top. Exactly. But it's one of those defining moments where like I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure like hindsight's going to be 20/20 or whatever they say, and it's all going to make sense as to why I went that direction. And now I'm getting ready to go to Europe. I'm going to be there for 3 months.
Hey, we got to have you back on.
Building
when you
my
come
company,
back.
doing the whole thing, and I'm like, this wouldn't even be an opportunity right now had I said yes to that. So let's go.
After you come back from Europe, love to have you back on. Debrief the Europe trip, see how everything is going, how you continue to scale, man. Just want to say, man, really appreciate you taking the time
Of course,
to come on Gridiron and Growth, man. Like this is what this is all about, man. And however we can support you, obviously we are good friends and we're going to continue to do great things together. But man, shout out to you.
Man, I appreciate it. Gridiron and Growth. I didn't recognize that was the name of the show. I love that. Yeah. And shout out to you all for coming together, masterminding, and pulling this off, man. I think you're going to affect so many lives for the better. I already see just the incredible magic that's going to be seeded from this space, man. So kudos.
Karl Sona, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.